Hey everybody, thanks for watching another episode of the Motley Stew Show, where I look at the past week and see what interesting things have floated to the top. Sorry for my absence last week, since I was having some technical difficulties, and you might also notice this week is going to look a little different because I'm actually using iMovie instead of Final Cut Pro. That was actually part of the technical difficulties that I had, was Final Cut Pro working with the new Yosemite. So at this point, I can't really tell how the menu is going to look, but here it is. For the appetizer this week, the Avengers trailer. Holy crap, Batman. Or, Batman is DC, so let's change that. Holy thunderous crap, Thor. The first trailer for the Age of Ultron hit the web a day early, but it didn't really matter because it racked up mega views for Marvel, actually breaking records for user views and engagement. So that's a good thing. People are definitely hungry for this movie. And there's so much to parse out, there's so many little things to dig into, but really overall, I think the tone was dark. I think that's what we get out of this movie trailer. Darkness. There's infighting, there's really intense staring at people, there's groups breaking up inside the group. I mean, this is pretty much bad news. It's not sunshine and rainbows for these superheroes. And in fact, it kind of feels like Thanksgiving for most families in the country. So the bar is set pretty high for this movie, considering the first Avengers actually broke superhero records all through history. But I feel that mega geek Joss Whedon deserves credit. He deserves our faith, and I think he'll deliver. Remember, this is the guy who also gave us Buffy and Firefly, so good for him. So in the salad portion this week, Facebook actually gave us two things of good cheer. First off, Mark Zuckerberg, the billion-dollar man, decided to actually give $25 million to Ebola research and containment efforts. That's really awesome. I mean, that's not a huge amount of money to him. Well, sure it is. It is a huge amount of money, but still, he can afford it. But there are a lot of people who can't afford to do things like that, and he still did. And on top of that, it's good because the NIH and the CDC have both had their budgets cut over the last 10 years, so $25 million is a lot to them, and it's really helpful. So that's cool in these days of freak out over Ebola. I think it's good for Facebook too, since now we don't fill it up with status updates like, what are you doing right now? I'm bleeding from every orifice, thanks for asking. Following that up, Facebook actually implemented a safety feature called Safety Check. This is to be used in times of chaos, in natural disasters, things that get national media coverage, and people end up flocking to their cell phones to call their family and their loved ones. Now, when everyone does that at one time, generally no one can get through. So Facebook said, okay, well look, if you can get through to Facebook, you can hit this safety check, and then anyone who can touch Facebook can see that you're okay. That's good. They'll know you're not buried under some mound of Mother Nature. Also, if you can't get to Facebook in natural disasters and chaos situations like that, it's good to use text. It uses up a lot less data, and you have a higher percentage of being able to get through the noise and get out to your family and your loved ones. So thanks to Mark Zuckerberg and to Facebook for doing these things. Good on ya. You can have another ad on my wall. So in the drinks portion this week, no more O'Keefe. Last episode, I actually talked about how we didn't want any more of a person named Keith Abloh because he's nuts and he gets too much media coverage. This week, I'm going to continue that tradition with James O'Keefe and his entire Project Veritas front. Now, this guy considers himself a journalist, but what he is a hack. He's someone who sets up scenarios, basically entrapping people into things, and then selectively editing videos to make it look like they're guilty of whatever it is he wanted to find in the first place. He doesn't hunt things down, he creates them. He found himself in the political spotlight a couple years ago when he went after a group called Acorn. They were a group that helped low-income areas get people registered to vote and government subsidies and get them enrolled in government programs. He went in there to prove that they were actually sidestepping the law and helping things that were illegal. Basically, like underage girls get abortions, get health coverage for hookers, all sorts of things that weren't supposed to happen. He did this by walking into an Acorn office dressed like a pimp, kind of one you would expect from the 70s, like a Shaft movie, and a lady friend who was dressed like a hooker. So when he walked in there, he asked all the questions that he wanted, and then selectively edited that video with their answers, and made it look like they were doing the things that he said that they were doing. Now, when this was actually fully investigated, there was no wrongdoing ever actually proven for the group Acorn. All they did prove was there was one person who worked there that made some bad judgments about how they phrased things or what they said. That person was actually fired. But O'Keefe and his gang gave all this evidence over to the Republicans and the Conservative Party, who raised their voices to the high hell, and then had Acorn shut down. So O'Keefe had actually now tasted liberal blood, and he wanted more. Next time we heard from him, it was actually him being arrested for going into a politician's office and trying to tap her phone lines, again, to prove something that he didn't know was actually taking place. When he was arrested, he got community service and a fine, but did that stop people from listening to him? No. Did that stop people from giving him airtime? No. This week, his group of conservative bloodhounds went out to Colorado, where in the midterm elections there is a very, very close race there. What he decided he wanted to find out was whether the Democrats were creating voter fraud, which is a big thing right now in the Republican Party and the voter ID laws. They want to prove that there is rampant amounts of voter fraud, which, in study after study after study, has actually shown it's more likely that you'll be hit by lightning, not just once, multiple times, before an actual case of voter fraud is found. But he decided to go there and prove his case, whether or not he had to make it up. So he goes there with his people, and one of them goes to a local nonprofit office that is helping to register people. Now, since that group leans to the left, he decided to prove that they were creating cases of voter fraud. His operative goes in there and says, I'm a college student and I want to help out. Here, give me a bunch of ballots, give me a bunch of mail-in registrations, and I'll just fill them out myself, because all my student friends aren't at the addresses that they say. Now, of course, the people in that office say you can't do that, that's voter fraud, and they give him summarily a kick to the butt out the door. He returns with O'Keefe in a brilliant disguise, adding a mustache. He now says he's a 45-year-old professor, which supposedly gives credence to this idea, and again, the people at the office say, no, you can't do that, that's voter fraud, leave please. They realize they're being punked, and it didn't take them long to figure out what was going on because they went online, they find James O'Keefe, and they actually find the fact that he had taken a photo of himself wearing the mustache, saying that he was going undercover and people might lose their jobs over what he was about to find out. Now, I don't know about you, I've never done undercover work, but let me tell you, I think the first thing about undercover work is don't post a photo of you in disguise telling everyone that you're undercover. This proves once again that O'Keefe is a hack. He is not a journalist. And what he does is he gives a bad name to people who are actually looking in to ethical and moral problems in the democratic process. To say that there's no corruption is naive, but to do this to prove corruption is just flat out stupid. His efforts from the beginning have been a joke and a blight on anyone who actually wants to go after corruption. He's a snake oil salesman running from talk radio to Fox News, telling tall tales and giving you empty promises about what he can find out. And everybody eats it up. It's bad enough that he had actually gotten the doors shuttered on a completely innocent nonprofit organization, and we can't let that happen again. The only fraud O'Keefe is ever actually going to find is when he looks in the mirror. So that leads really well to the main course this week, which is the midterm elections coming up in a very short amount of time. November 4th, go to your local voting booths, go to your local polling station, and actually vote. This is really important. And midterm elections generally, traditionally, are very low turnout, because they're not presidential elections. People can't really narrow their focus down to one single person thinking this is the person that's going to lead the country. But we have to realize the president doesn't run the country alone. He's not a king or an emperor. This is one man at the top of a lot of people's offices. It's a triangle of equal government. You've got the executive, the judicial, and Congress. So all of those pieces are important. And a lot of those people in Congress right now are running for re-election. So the makeup of that body can very well influence the makeup of the other two. Now, I'm not telling you who to vote for. It doesn't really matter. I just want you to vote. It's just as important as you would be doing in a presidential election. People have fought for decades, if not centuries, for the right for you to have this. It's what makes our country unique, and it's what makes our experiment of democracy work. Now, I know there's probably a voice in your head that's saying,
one vote won't count, my vote doesn't matter.
But we actually live in a generation that knows that not to be true. If you look back just to the 2000 presidential election between Gore and Bush, one state, Florida, was so close that that state actually gave the deciding factor of who won the presidency. Now, if the votes had actually been just a little more leaning towards Gore, they wouldn't have had to do a recount. And they would have known from the front that Gore won it outright, which we all know after the recount was finally done. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court came in and said that the recount wasn't necessary, they were just going to go with the original call from the state's office, and they gave the election to Bush. Bush did not win the popular election, he did not win the Electoral College, he didn't win the presidency. The Supreme Court gave it to him. But if more people had just voted, just a few more, over to Gore's side, then it wouldn't have been close enough to have that kind of mistake take place. Now, would that have changed the course of history for our country? Who knows? Who's to say? 9/11 would likely have still happened. But what would Gore's response have been versus the way Bush did it? Would Gore have run into Iraq? Would he have gone after Saddam Hussein for no reason? Or would he have gone just after bin Laden? Would he have gotten bin Laden before Obama got bin Laden? Would Obama even have been elected? Because we have to admit that a lot of Obama voters were people who were so fed up with Bush. Obama definitely is a reaction to the 8 years of Bush. So that's how important one vote can be. So on November 4th, find your polling station and find your voice. For the dessert this week, short film. Now, short films are a really hard medium to master because you have a little amount of time to get across your point. You don't get to really dive into character development, story development, environment development. You have to be really specific about what you show and what you say because your time's running out from the moment that first frame hits. Now, this short film called Ambition is awesome. It's got all those little fiery bits that sci-fi fans like myself love. Planet creation, matter manipulation. It's kind of awesome. And on top of that, it's got one of the great actors from Game of Thrones. So when you find yourself with some free time, take 6 minutes, sit down in your chair, and enjoy Ambition. In the charity this week, I want to talk about the Lunchbox Fund. And this is a non-profit group that actually reaches out to kids down in Africa and provides them with balanced meals every day that sometimes they won't get for days at a time. Now, it can be hard enough for kids to learn in school anyway, but think about trying to do that when battling massive amounts of hunger and poverty. Now, beyond this food helping them physically, it actually helps them psychologically as well. It can help them grow up, get the education they need, and they have a lower chance of contracting HIV, they have a lower chance of staying in poverty, and it can help out the entire society. So this is a really beneficial group. Many of us actually take for granted that we will always have food when we want it and we can go to the kitchen and grab a snack. But think about going every day where you don't have that choice, you don't have that ability. So if you have the time and you have a couple bucks, send it to this group and help the kids in Africa actually feel that same thing. Finally, in the Something to Think About section this week, there's Gamergate. Now, I was ready to rant about this last week, and then I missed that episode, and I thought, this will be old news by then. But guess what? It's still here. Just look at what happened to Felicia Day. Now again, if you don't know what's going on with Gamergate and you don't know what it is, here's the story. One guy broke up with one girl and he decided to go out and write this huge blog post about everything that went wrong and it was all her fault and all these allegedly terrible things that she did. Now, she, being a game developer, one of the terrible things that he said she did was actually sleep with game journalists in order to get better coverage for her games. Now, if she did that, that is a terrible thing. But this blog post became a clarion call for everybody who is angry about the onslaught of what they consider negative imagery for gamers. They look at the upcoming voices of people like Anita Sarkeesian and that they're talking about feminism in video games and saying how the female gender is depicted in video game culture. They don't like that. They don't like video game culture or gamers themselves being attacked for something they see is not broken. But I don't know about you, but I wonder if this is the right response to something like this. When women come out and say they're harassed and sexually abused online for being females in games, I don't think the way to handle that and prove that it's not the case is to do exactly that. When Felicia Day, who had said, I'm not going to talk about Gamergate because she was too afraid of the backlash, finally decided to break her silence about it by saying one little thing, she was immediately doxxed, which means her personal information was put online. And she's not the first woman to have that happen. 3 people, actually, have already been chased out of their homes. Now, honestly, I don't exactly see what the people behind Gamergate are so angry about. They say they're fighting for ethics in video game journalism, and they're saying that there's tons of corruption out there. There's collusion between the game makers and the game journalists, and that they're trying to fight. They're trying to clean the board, clean the slate, and make it even for everybody. But I don't really see that that's been proven out. What has been proven out is the people who say they're against Gamergate or don't believe in it necessarily are being attacked and harassed viciously online. That has got to stop. That is not proving anybody's case. Mainly, the people that they're attacking are just saying they would like to see badass female characters that don't have to show their ass in order to get in the game. The supporters of Gamergate are trying to say that gamers are not some sort of bro-hound, knuckle-dragging rape monster, and that that's what they're being painted as by feminists. But I haven't seen that, and I've been watching Sarkeesian's videos, and I've been reading stuff that's come out from feminists about the video game industry. They're not saying terrible things about gamers. They're talking about the games themselves. And they're not even saying that all games are bad, just that there's a historical bend against women and how they're depicted. I mean, I would openly agree with the people from Gamergate if there was actually proof about gaming journalism being corrupt. I don't think there should be corruption anywhere. I don't think there should be collusion between the game developers and the game reviewers. That's not good for anybody. But no matter what the case is, the people who are harassing these women aren't supporting anything. They're not helping their side. And the Gamergate hashtag has absolutely been overcome by trolls. Now, whether that was intentional or not doesn't matter. It is the case of what it is now. Gamergate is not synonymous with ethics in video game journalism. It is synonymous with harassment and anti-feminism. But what do you think? What do you think about the core question of Gamergate? Do you believe that there is corruption in video game journalism? Do you think that Gamergate had a right point in the beginning? Or do you think that this is just more anger towards people like Anita Sarkeesian, Felicia Day, and all the other women in the video game industry? Thanks for watching another episode of the Motley Stew. You can like, favorite, share, subscribe. All those things are awesome, and I thank you for it. And just as always, here's a little bit of Logan.
1, 2, 3, jump! 1, 2, 3, jump! 1, 2, 3, jump! 1, 2, 3, jump! Oh my god! You gonna jump? Jump! Or stand there. You were a lot funnier a little minute ago. Jump! 1, 2, you're leaving the ball pit.